And welcome back for our closing comments and notes from the leaders. Unfortunately, there's been an internet outage in the north, and Charles Morvan, Secretary Treasurer for the Nisga'a Nation, is unable to log in. So this is one of the challenges of virtual conferences. So I'm going to fill in for Charles with his speaking points, and thank you for allowing me to do so. First and foremost, I want to thank you all, speakers and participants alike, for your courage and your initiative. Climate change is a frightening thing, so is poverty, and we can deal with both. We've learned many things today, and I'm inspired by the new innovations and new opportunities for First Nations to pursue in partnership with non-First Nations as part of building the decarbonized economy and recovering the climate. We've heard about 3 essential strategies for recovering the climate: nature-based solutions, new energy systems, and carbon capture, utilization, and storage. And FNCI is continuing to work on building and implementing these strategies together with many of you. And those of you who are not involved are invited to become involved. Nature-based solutions do many things for us, protecting and recovering the ecosystems that are instrumental to the First Nations cultures, absorbing carbon from the atmosphere, bringing revenue and employment to First Nations people, helping First Nations communities recover their well-being. So far, we have have 7 nations working together on NBS projects across the north, and we welcome the opportunity to expand that number. The First Nations Climate Initiative NBS project also includes carbon experts and ecologists, carbon traders, energy and investment companies, and the provincial government. We're hosting a conference on nature-based solutions on October 12th, 13th, and 14th to engage more people in the progress we are making with this strategy. Please let us know if you'd like to be involved. Of critical importance for success with NBS in BC is that we have to have a functional forest carbon offset protocol in place to support these projects. We can't afford to get this wrong, and we have much to gain by getting it right. We also need to ensure that carbon tax dollars are directed into NBS because it's one of the principal means for recovering our climate. The new energy systems speakers today introduced us to technologies and opportunities that I'm sure were new to many of us. They're technologies suited to a decarbonized economy and a recovering climate. And they are here now, and we need to embrace them in order to reverse the fundamental trend of climate change. As President Clayton said this morning, getting to net zero is not good enough. We need to reduce the concentrations of GHGs in the atmosphere in order to recover the more stable climatic conditions that our communities and the world's ecosystems and all living things are adapted to. We need carbon capture, utilization, and storage in addition to new energy systems and nature-based solutions in order to reduce those GHG concentrations and eliminate emissions we are challenged to avoid. It is remarkable that some of the companies that spoke today are combining new energy systems with carbon capture, utilization, and storage to create negative emission systems. We need more of this, and we need it all soon. I really like the ambition we heard today from some of our speakers, telling us that 2050 is too late. We need to ramp up our ambition. I echo President Clayton's offer to work together with the federal government to partner with Asian countries to help them eliminate their emissions. We have the capacity to achieve this as Canadians, and we have an obligation to do so for all of our sakes. Thank you again for joining us, and thank you to our federal, provincial, and corporate sponsors. Your financial support has helped to make this possible. Just like to add one thing to just draw your attention to the theme of this conference, which is Beyond Zero, First Nations Leadership for a Recovering Climate. And I want to do this by tapping into your imaginations. You've heard of the carrot and the stick. Well, there's a lot of promise in what we've heard today from people. We can, we will, and we must get to net zero as quickly as possible and into recovering the climate immediately thereafter, which brings me to the stick. And I think of this by imagining how difficult it is to climb one of the highest mountains in the world, like K2. It's an incredibly difficult journey to the top, and that's like getting to net zero. And as inhospitable a place as any of us can imagine. And you still need to get back to base camp to safety. Unfortunately, most climbers die on the way down. So net zero is not our destination. A recovered climate is. Which brings me to the last part of the analogy. The climbing community ignored Indigenous climbers for many years. And they decided to show us how to climb these mountains. And they made the movie 14 Peaks. Nothing is impossible. And with that, I'd like to turn the floor over to Crystal Smith, Chief Councillor of the Haisla Nation and one of the founding leaders of the FNCI, for her closing comments. Thank you very much.
Alex covered some very important points just now, and Eva did this morning, which I wholeheartedly support. And I want to emphasize a few things in closing. First Nations leaders like myself and Eva and Charles and the Nisga'a are moving forward on behalf of our communities to replace poverty with prosperity and to work with all other levels of government, the private sector, experts of all kinds, and civil society organizations to recover the climate. We cannot take no, or it cannot be done for an answer. We cannot afford to. None of us can. I'm reminded all the time by the Haisla people that we are making progress. We are moving forward. People have jobs now, and we have real hope for a better future. And we intend to use that momentum and hope to take on the challenges of climate change. So I'm asking those of you that are working with us to redouble your efforts, and to those who are not yet, to join us. If you think you have different views, we welcome them. As Eva said this morning, we are challenged by fear and uncertainty, which make it even harder to work together. But we have to work together if we are going to build a decarbonized economy and recover the climate. We all know that our communities and homelands are not isolated from the rest of the world in some kind of bubble. We have to act locally and globally. We need to reach out for other people around the world and work with them to address climate change. We have many valuable things to bring to that global table, and we have an obligation to do this. We can't look back and wonder why we did not act more bravely. I have often been labeled as a face for LNG. I hope you've seen today that FNCI is very broad. It has a very broad scope. Natural gas has a role to play, particularly as a zero-emission source of hydrogen rather than as a fuel for burning. And nature-based solutions and protection and recovery of the ecosystems in our territories are as close to my heart as you can get. When I think of my home, I think of the place, the people, the animals, the fish, and I see that net zero is not our destination, as Eva said this morning. When we get there, it is going to be uncomfortable. Our destination is a recovered climate and a world where looking after ecosystems is not an afterthought on some checklist. Today, we have heard from many people who understand this and are taking the initiative to help tackle the most difficult problem people of the world have ever faced. FNCI thanks you for this and invites you to become a part of the initiative because we have a long way to go and we need people like you to get there. On behalf of the FNCI leadership, I also want to thank all of the Indigenous leaders and representatives who participated today. It is very heartwarming and exciting to have you expand our efforts so we can work together to meet all of our needs. I want to thank Minister Ralston for lending your support to our efforts and to the provincial staff who are actively involved in FNCI projects. And thank you to Minister Guilbeault. I hope you take up our invitation to work with us on a global scale and for the continued support of the federal government for FNCI. And to all of you who have supported us from the start and continue to do so, thank you. We have a lot more work to do, but we can do it.